In this video, I want to show you how to work with blocks and symbols. The fact is the two terms are synonymous. As drafters and designers, we always use the term symbol when we have to place symbols into our drawing. And then AutoCAD came around and decided that we would no longer use the term symbol, but now we'll just call those things blocks. So from here on out, we'll just talk about blocks. Making a block in AutoCAD is rather simple, and then using those blocks is rather simple. And let's talk about that. First thing I'm going to do is go up here and grab my New button, which is actually the QNew command, and I pick that. And because of things we learned in previous videos, it automatically starts using our template file, has the object layer current that we created in a previous video, and we're off and running. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do, and one of the major initial points to understand, is that usually, if not always, we want to draw our symbols on layer 0. And I'll talk about the advantage of that in just a minute. So even though we rarely use layer 0, this is the one time that we do use layer 0. And I'll just draw a symbol. We'll just draw one of my world famous stars here. We'll close that up and let's just say, golly, that's beautiful. I like to, have that become a star and use it in my drawing all over the place. So to create a block called star, I'm going to go to the Insert tab, and before I can go to Insert, I need to create the block in the first place. So I'm going to pick this button right here, and the name of the command is actually block. You could type in block. I think BL might be short enough for it, but let's just pick it. It's right there. And up comes a dialog box that lets us define the block. First thing we want to do is give this block a name, and we'll call it star for lack of anything better. Then I'm going to kind of move this over so it's not on top of there. Then we have to designate a base point, okay? And we typically want to go ahead and do that right now. Pick a point. And we can just pick one of the corners of the star, or if we're not really that particular, maybe just somewhere in the middle of it. I'll just pick a point. Say I'm going to pick a point, and then I will pick just somewhere in the middle. That's where I want to have a hold of it whenever I go to put this star into my drawing. Okay? And so that's taken care of. And there, boy, they felt it was important to tell us to 3,000 decimal places where we actually picked on the X and Y grid. The next thing we want to do is say which objects we want to have be involved in the block called star. So I will select objects. I'll just do a crossing window because it's nice and cheap and dirty and easy. And I hit enter. Dialog box pops back up. And for right now, we're going to ignore this. This is kind of some advanced information. If I do a series of advanced videos, we'll talk about that. But for right now, we really don't care. Now, I'm about to say OK to finish this. We really don't even care about this stuff down here. And descriptions, I don't know of anybody that ever places descriptions on their, or a description on any of their blocks. So we'll leave that alone too. But I'm going to say OK. And what I want you to understand is that upon saying OK, this is going to turn into that block. If I were to pick retain instead, it would retain those 5 separate lines. There would be a block in this drawing called star, but this would not be a star. It would just be 5 separate lines. And then the last object is to delete it. We could say that I want to make a block in this drawing called star, but get rid of these 5 lines. I don't want it to be right there. For simplicity's sake, I'll just leave it at convert to block, and that becomes a star. And I say OK. And if I hover over it, you can see that the whole thing highlights. It tells me that it's a block reference. If I pick it and my quick properties comes up, you can see that that is a block called star. Now, to put that into our drawing, I go to the Insert button right up here. Or I can type in an I and hit enter, and that's good enough to get into the insert command. I'll pick this, and it shows me what blocks in this drawing I can insert. And because I've only created one, it only shows me one. So I'll pick that, and then I can put this wherever I want. You can see that I have a hold of it right at that point that I designated as the insertion point. And there's my block called star. Now, it looks exactly like the other block that I created. It looks exactly like the fact that I drew it on layer 0, white solid lines, because we never changed what layer 0 looks like. Now what I want to do is go to Home tab and make a different layer current. And now if I insert, I'll just type in an I to get into the actual insert command. And a new palette comes out showing me what blocks I can make. I'm not in love with this. This is a brand new feature in as of AutoCAD 2020, I believe. Not in love with it. I can show you how to override that in a minute. But I will pick this and I insert it, and now look at the fact that it takes on the properties of the current layer. If the objects that you include in your block were originally drawn on layer 0, when you insert that block, it will take on the properties of whatever layer is current. I'll make the hidden layer current, bring this out, come up. If I were to have drawn this on the hidden line layer, it would look like that. And if I make it into a block called star, it would look like that. If I insert it on layer object, which is green solid lines, it would look like this. It would be on the object layer, but it would look like this. Its properties kind of hold true, so to speak. Layer 0, all those object properties migrate to the current layer. So that's how to insert a block. I'm going to play around here a little bit, and I'm going to close this palette up. I don't like the fact that it stays on the screen the whole time. I'm going to type in -I, which brings up a non-dialog box version of the insert command, way back in the old days before we had dialog boxes to work with. This is what the insert command looked like. So I'll do -I and say enter the block name, and you can see that it remembers what the last block was that we used, and it comes up with that name as a default. I can just accept it by hitting enter, and then it asks me for an insertion point. I can pick. Then it asks me for the scale factor in the X direction, showing 1 as a default, and I'll hit enter to accept that. And then it asks me for the scale factor in the Y direction, and it says that whatever you used for the X scale factor will be used as the default for this scale factor, and I'll just hit enter to accept that. And then it asks for the rotation angle, and I can type in an angle, or I can yank this to some other angle and hit enter to accept the scale factor, or excuse me, an angle rotation of 0, meaning show it to me in the exact orientation that I drew it in the first place. And there's our block called star inserted with the old-fashioned insert command. I'll show you this. It's not all that important. There's a system variable, or if you want to use the old dialog box for the insert command, and if you're a new user, you don't know what the old dialog box looks like, but I kind of like the way it looks. The name of the command is called classic insert. Bypass the dialog, or the palette version of the insert command, and go to the old dialog box version. I pick this, and this is what I'm used to seeing. I can pick the block name from the drop-down list. I only have star in here, so it's there. We'll talk about browse in another video in just a second. Specify the insertion point on the screen. Here I'm saying don't specify the scale factors on screen. Just use 1, 1, and we're not into 3D, so the Z factor is not even being calculated. Just use these that are plugged in there, and don't specify the rotation angle on the screen. Just use angle 0. So it's not going to ask me for this like it did when I did the non-dialog box version of the insert command, that -I. And I say OK, and I can put my block wherever I want, and there it is. So that's your insert command and your block command, which lets you create the block in the first place. Remember, your objects typically will want to be drawn on layer 0, and then make the block, and then insert the block.